and welcome to a new episode of the Good Old Podcast. I'm Jacquie Franciulli for Wahoo's 24/7, and we're talking Virginia men's basketball. The Cavaliers face in-state rival Virginia Tech on Wednesday night, and they took care of business on the hardwood, beating the Hokies 78-68. And it was a hard-fought battle between both of these teams who had quite the offensive showing. So if you're on YouTube, I'm about to place the box score up on the screen. If you're not and you're just listening in, this is available on the game thread on Wahoo's 24/7. And I also tweeted it out at @JackieFrank_ after the game as well. So you get to see the stats, but I will make sure to say the stats that are key when I'm talking about the game as well. So it was a good game offensively for both sides. Actually, both coaches were pretty pleased with their offensive showing. Virginia Tech shot 49%, 44% from three. And usually when you see those stats, you would think that Virginia Tech would have been the winner. However, Virginia also had a good day on the offensive side, shooting 51% from the field. They also had 35% from three. But again, this was a game that it was, again, about the backcourt for Virginia. This has been, I think, 4 in a row where we get to see Kihei Clark, Reese Beekman, and Armaan Franklin really take control of the game. In this matchup, they combined for 46 points, were 17 of 33 shooting, 5 of 11 from three. And what was big between those three, they had 1 turnover. Ball security came up big in this game. Virginia Tech had 8. Some of those came in early, and Virginia only had 5 turnovers, and only 1 of those came between those 3 players that have been really kind of come together for the Cavaliers in recent games. Tony Bennett has gone small ball, and that has really made a difference on the offensive side. Ben Vanderplas has started the last 2 games, and it seems like this kind of combination between, you see Kihei Clark, Reese Beekman, Armaan Franklin, and Ben Vanderplas, and then sometimes you see Isaac McNeely in that lineup. You've seen Ryan Dunn kind of rise a little bit in the last few weeks, and it seems those type of combinations has really sparked the offensive side of Virginia basketball. And we've seen Caden Shedrick kind of see less and less minutes in the last few games. And we'll kind of talk about Caden in just a few minutes. But so again, this was a good game for the Virginia offense. And again, a great game for the backcourt. And several of the players on the Virginia side ended in double digits. Kihei Clark had 20 points, which I believe matches his career high. He's also the winningest player in UVA history. He passed Mamadi Diakite for the most wins at UVA. Now, obviously, Tony Bennett joked on that point that this was an asterisk since he was doing it in 5 years rather than 4 than the other guys did at Virginia. But you also had to put that COVID year too. So I guess it's double asterisk, maybe. Jaden Gardner had 12. Reese Beekman had 11. Armaan Franklin had 15. And Ben Vanderplas, after a slow start, had 10 points. He shot 2 of 7 on the day from outside the arc. And then Isaac McNeely had 7. And then Ryan Dunn comes in with 3 points and an old-fashioned 3-point play. So again, Virginia is coming together, and it felt like Tony Bennett is also very willing to adjust this year, which has been nice to see. He's been willing to adjust and play the hot hand. Again, something that is nice to see with a lot of talent that Virginia has on the roster. Kihei Clark and Reese Beekman have also done really well dishing the ball. They had 12 assists against Virginia Tech combined. They are now 2nd and 3rd in the ACC, respectively, for assists per game. So this has been a solid last streak, and we're seeing Reese Beekman at its healthiest now. We can clearly see the difference in a healthy Reese Beekman and a not a healthy Reese Beekman. We also can see clearly what Reese Beekman really brings to this Virginia Cavaliers basketball team, and what happens when he's not at full strength. You lose that burst, you lose that speed, and he's truly makes an impact on the court. I'm really happy to see what Ryan Dunn has been able to accomplish as a first year. He has really been able to kind of come in his own and play a little bit more confidence. He's becoming a very good asset on the defensive side for Virginia. So at Florida State, at that point, he had a career high of 17 minutes and he had 9 points, and he was able to build on that performance against Virginia Tech when he played 24 minutes and again made some big impacts on the defensive side. Like I said, he made some nice blocks for Virginia down that stretch when Virginia Tech wasn't really going away a lot of these games. There was 4 lead changes in this game. There was 4 times where this game was tied. So again, Ryan Dunn made some crucial impacts. Something like Kihei Clark, who always seems to make a good play on offense, including that really big 3 that he had in the second half. So by saying that about Ryan Dunn, now the question is, what happens with Caden Shedrick? He's kind of the opposite of Ryan Dunn, where Caden Shedrick, I believe against North Carolina, he had about 20 minutes of play. And then in the last 2 games, he has only played 9. And he's seen his kind of role kind of decrease as Virginia has gone small ball. So as Virginia continues on this ACC schedules, and Tony Bennett is going to adjust depending on the matchups and the lineups. But the last 2 games, Ben Vanderplas has been starting and Caden Shedrick has been coming off the bench. But against Virginia Tech, the first guy off the bench usually has been Isaac McNeely, to be quite fair, or Ben Vanderplas. Those are the 2 that's been coming off the bench when Ben Vanderplas didn't start. But now on Wednesday, it was Ryan Dunn was the first guy to come off the bench. So Ryan Dunn's ascendancy has kind of come in the same time as Caden Shedrick has been losing minutes. And honestly, they haven't played much of a true center in the last few games either. A lot of the minutes have been so small ball. So again, that's something that Tony Bennett is more comfortable doing. And when you have 3 guys in the backcourt playing as efficiently as Franklin, Beekman, and Clark is doing, you can see why Tony Bennett is doing what he is doing. But Virginia is going to play at Wake Forest on Saturday, so they don't have much time to kind of stick and thinking about Virginia Tech's win, although it's a very big in-state game and beating your rival is always great. But you got to face Wake Forest, who is also on trying to kind of turn around their season. They beat Clemson, the number 19 team in the AP poll this week, pretty convincingly after I think Clemson only led for 29 seconds, actually. They only led for about 29 seconds. And they were able to secure the 10-point win. And it was a very good win, a win that they would have not had if this game was played in October or November. So we're going to take a very quick break. And we're going to actually bring in a guest this week to break down this game. Usually during football season, I like to bring in opposing reporters, not opposing reporters, I guess, reporters that cover the opposing team. So I always like to bring them on so that we can discuss the game in a little bit more in detail, since they know the other team better than I do, since they cover that team more extensively. So this week, we're actually going to bring Cam Lemons Debro from Deacons Digest, the Wake Forest site on 24/7. So we can talk about the game and talk about that win for Wake Forest, so we know what happened and what changes have been made for Wake Forest and what to expect when Wake Forest and Virginia face off against each other on Saturday. So we will just take a quick break for a few seconds, and then we'll be right back. And welcome back to the Good Old Podcast. I'm Jacquie Franciulli for Wahoo's 24/7. So the first half of the show, we kind of talked about Virginia men's basketball and how they beat Virginia Tech, some of our big takeaways there. But now we move forward. Virginia will face Wake Forest at Wake on Saturday. And of course, we need to bring in Deacon Digest, Cam Lemons, to talk about the Deacons and what this matchup will look like. So Cam, thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to have me. Thanks for being. I'm very happy to be here.
So it's been an interesting season for the Deacons, I think, to put it mildly. This seems like a team that might have had a turning point against Clemson, the number 19 team. It felt like Wake won a game that they wouldn't have won in October, November. Do you kind of see that?
Yeah, no, I think this team has definitely started to grow up. Steve Forbes talked a little bit earlier in the season about big boy games. And Wake had, I wouldn't say issues in big boy games, but they definitely had some times where, they came up a little flat. They obviously had the win at Wisconsin, but then 3 days later they have their opening ACC game at Clemson and just lost by 20. It wasn't really a pretty second half there. They went to Atlanta, played LSU, State Farm Arena, and let that one slip away. They went up to Rutgers, really tough place to play. lost by 24. There were these games earlier in the year that Wake just wasn't exactly doing what they needed to do in these big boy games. And then you saw they turned it around against a Duke team. They beat Virginia Tech, had a little bit of a tough loss against North Carolina, but the next few games they win. Okay, they're beating Louisville and Florida State and Boston College. I mean, yes, we got to beat them. Some people haven't, but that's still three of the not great teams, or the worst teams really in the ACC. Clemson was the first time that we went, okay, this was a team that has beaten us already. PJ Hall had basically run them up and down the floor last time. While you're at home, it's 9 p.m. game, can be kind of sleepy. The Wake Forest joke is Tuesdays is our toughest day academically for our student athletes. And I went out there and kind of really wire to wire took care of business. And it was really the first time. There was definitely some lapses here and there of where the league got a little bit closer within 5-6 points. But as a whole, this was a win that wire to wire Wake Forest took care of business. That's something that we really have wanted to see out of this team is what can you do wire to wire? Can you put together a full 2 halves and say we are just going to be the better team here tonight? And I think that was a good data point in saying, hey, this is where you turn the corner and start showing yourself, hey, we're for real and we're going to be an NCAA tournament team.
Yeah, Clemson, I think, only led for like 29 seconds in that game that Wake Forest won by 10, and they shot 50% behind the arc in the win. They out-rebounded Clemson by 9. So it was certainly a game where they got the advantage in several different areas, and it felt like this team is finally finding its identity. It's always hard when you're meshing new guys in a lineup, but it feels like they now have an identity coming down to a very hard stretch, which includes 10th ranked Virginia on Saturday.
Yeah, no, I mean, this team's actually really started to find what they're going to do. And what they're going to do is they're going to take threes. Like they have Damari Monsanto, Ty Appleby, Andrew Carr's come around really well the last few games. Davian Williamson, they are going to be a team that they've been on a very torrid pace on offense. But I think the biggest identity for them has been what Forbes' motto is grimy, gritty, tough together. They've had to scrap together some wins. It's not been pretty sometimes. Against App State, they had to win on a buzzer beater, which seems weird to do against the 208th ranked team according to Net. But they've just been willing to just get into the mud and say, we're going to do what we do best, which right now is shooting threes and really throwing lobs. And, some of the things that we don't do well, they're not really the best of defensive teams right now. But when they do kind of get into the rhythm on the half court, they're great at forcing turnovers. They're great at Matthew Marsh has been great offensively. Defensively, David Bradford he's been awful offensively. I wouldn't say awful, he's been great, but he's been a force they've been able to put in there on a guy like PJ Hall last game and say, can you give us 15 minutes of just being a wall? Like they've really started to lean into the idea of it doesn't really matter what our weakness is right now. We're just going to play to whatever our strength is right now and just grind it out. You're just going to sit there and grind.
And you mentioned Ty Appleby, a favorite of mine when he was a Gator down in Gainesville when I covered them. What did he bring when he came in for Wake Forest as a transfer? What kind of advantages did he bring?
So, I mean, there was definitely a bit of a hesitancy in terms of what Wake was going to have at that spot when you lose the ACC Player of the Year in Alondes Williams. So Ty, I mean, we'd heard a lot on the offseason of how good Ty was. He's explosive. He's the fastest player on the team. But what are we really trying to expect from him? And he just came out of the gate just being the best player on the court. Like every single time, he's like, all right, cool. Ty is how this engine is going, and it's been to the better of the team because when he needs to take over, he will take over. And sometimes if he's in foul trouble, or there was a couple games where you could tell he was a bit limited. The Wake's offense didn't really know what to do without him, but he's really been the cog in the offense of saying, when he gets downhill, it's just up the center of gravity he has. 2-3 guys are going to keep coming into him, and he can easily kick it out to Monsanto, who's has the light come on for him. Davion Williamson, Andrew Carr, he's been really able to just use his gravity as a driver, and it's been really lovely to see. He's been arguably my favorite player to watch in the last 5, 6, 7 years. He's just been so much fun. He's tough. He's about 6 feet, 200 pounds. I think about that. I think that's a gracious measurement for him, but he's really added a dimension to the team that we didn't really see of Alondes, and there's no disrespect to Alondes. Alondes obviously Player of the Year last year, but I think him being able to actually hit threes from the outside and take them at a pretty decent clip has been has unlocked a new dimension that we saw from last year.
Also quite the character too, right?
Oh, he's been one of the best people in interviews. One of my favorite things after a win, the Wake Forest basketball Twitter will have him interview one of the other players in the locker room. He'll just do that after they beat Clemson. He was on the quad just interviewing students left and right. I love that kid.
I did the same thing when I was on the Gators beat. He was a transfer and he sat out for a year, and we would always have him interview players too. So he's accustomed to it. So it's nice that he's continuing it. So you talked a little bit about Ty's ability to shoot the three when you're facing the pack line. That is a good asset to have. So what are some of the keys to the game when they face the Cavaliers on Saturday when you look at Wake Forest?
They can't let UVA speed them up. I know UVA is a very slow team. That's a really weird thing to say, but they can't be frustrated and just let things kind of snowball. That was one of the big things that happened in the game against Rutgers. Was Rutgers just sped them up and just said, "You're not going to be able to get into the paint. I live by the three, die by the three." But the fact that they were just forcing so many turnovers, the team just kind of felt frazzled at that point. And that's something that can't happen in a game like this against UVA, where possessions are going to be a premium. When UVA can just sit there and just melt the clock. If you're sitting here wasting possessions against a team that you're not guaranteed to score 50, 60 points against, that's going to be an issue. They're going to have to count on guys like Damari to really take some smart shots and handle the ball well. A guy like Cam Hildreth, who's been playing insanely well as of late. But I mean, one of the issues he had against UNC was UNC really just kind of sped him up a bit. And I think UVA is going to try and do that, especially when Ty Appleby's not on the court. And Wake's definitely got to take care of the basketball. I mean, like I said, it comes down to, can Wake shoot? You're not always going to shoot 40, 45% from the field, but you've got to sit there and you got to take good shots and you have to still make them.
Yeah, they should ask Virginia Tech. They had a good offensive game against Virginia, shooting around 50% on the three at some point, and they still couldn't muster the win. So it's very important to be quite efficient on the offensive side of the ball when you face that tackling defense. But Cam, thank you so much for joining us. I know, just like me, you're kind of busy with a few junior days and recruiting visits.
No.
It's quite a busy period for anyone who covers for like recruiting and basketball and team for football. It's a little hectic in January.
It's supposed to be the time that we rest. There's no games. It's just tracking down 50, 60, 16, 18-year-olds and figuring out what they're doing with their lives.
And figuring out where the coaches are too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Cam, thanks.
Happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much for Cam for joining us on the show. Again, it's always nice when we can to have the reporter that covers the opponent on the show so that we know a little bit more about what to expect when it comes to game day. Now, I was planning to have a women's basketball kind of breakdown as well. What I'm going to do, instead of doing it today and kind of rushing it, I am going to have Greg Medea from the Daily Progress on the show next week. And we're going to have a longer basketball focused show where we're going to break down not only men's basketball, but also women's basketball, since Greg Medea has done a good job covering the women's program as well this year. And then we will also bring in possibly Michael Kieran, who is our awesome intern on Wahoo's 24/7, who's also done a great job covering the women's program and being there for the home games. So that is the plan for next week's Thursday episode. On Tuesday, once again, we will be covering recruiting for Virginia football. This week, they'll have official visitors on grounds. If you want to see the full official visitor list, head over to Wahoo's 24/7, which includes 2 2023 targets, including safety Devin Clark and offensive lineman Jameson Mejia. We are still working on confirming several other visitors that could be on their way as well. So we will have the full list on Friday on Wahoo's 24/7. And of course, we'll be talking about the significance of this visitor list on Tuesday here on the podcast. And honestly, I would be on commitment watch if I were you the next few days when it comes to Virginia football. So, but that's it for this episode. Again, if you like what you're hearing, go ahead and subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcast, and review and rate us on Apple and on Spotify. So I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we will see you back here on Tuesday.